then go to Pauline, then go to Tom O, then Beatrice Manyasi. I'll just go one by one. So myself, I'm James Joey from ANI, and also from the East African Community Secretariat Arusha, where I'm Principal Education Officer. Thank you so much. Pauline?
Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen, dear colleagues. My name is Pauline Gimo. I know by now I am a very familiar face to most of you. So I work for PASGA. PASGA is co-hosting this house with Annie. And it is our delight to welcome you to this afternoon. We look forward to a very fruitful engagement. Thank you very much. Back to you, James.
Thanks so much, Pauline. Then I'll give to Tom O. I'm seeing a name, Tom O.
Thanks. Good afternoon, everyone. So this is Tom.
Yes, that's you.
Yes, yeah, that's me. As a part of BMT Africa. So BMT is an online platform. It's an OTA, what you call online travel agency, that basically guys can use to book, everything online. So thanks, and I'm happy to be part of the team and just to engage and know where we patch in terms of private vis-a-vis, public institutions when it comes to higher education learning. Thank you.
Thanks so much, Tom. Then I go to Beatrice Manyasi.
Okay, good afternoon. I'm Beatrice Manyasi from Masai Mara University. I'm happy to be part of the team. Thank you.
Thanks so much, Beatrice. Then we go to Brian Amu.
Good evening, members. My name is Brian Amu. I'm from Amac Investment. We are a technology company. We collaborate with several organizations on use of satellite data. I was grouped into PPP thematic area from the last convening that we had, and I'm really glad to be here and learn more from you. Thank you.
Most welcome. We get to David Muya.
Oh, hi team. My name is David and I'm from IAN. IAN is International Education and Resource Network. However, we collaborate a lot with Annie. We are like the baby child of Annie. So all the dreams of an internationalization of education, we are also applying them, but basically at the lower part is in secondary and high and primary schools and TVET centers. So we are very honored to be here. We've been part of this since the beginning, and we are more of Annie than even I am in this. Thank you so much. And thank you so much, Chairman, for this opportunity. Thank you.
Thank you so much, David. Then I have Dr. Chemeli.
Yes, good afternoon, everyone.
Good afternoon.
Yes, I am Dr. Chemeli Janet from Moi University, and I was put in this group. I was not in the last session due to some commitments, but now I am happy to be in this group. So thank you so much.
Most welcome, Dr. Karibu sana. We have then Evans Moss from KICD.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Dr. Joy. I'm Evans Moss. I'm a member of ANI, and I'm also working at KICD as a consultancy.
Could you speak up a bit? We can't get you clearly, at least on my end.
Good afternoon. Am I clearer now?
Yeah, it's better now.
Okay, I'm saying I'm a member of ANI, and I'm also working at KICD as a consultancy and resource mobilization officer. I'm glad to be doing the second day of our convening. It is interesting that in our conversations yesterday on matters access, we kept talking about partnerships. So it is good that today we are actually engaging in that conversation, and I look forward to a fruitful session. Thank you very much.
Thanks so much, Evans, and most welcome to you too. John Duri.
Thanks so much, Dr. Jovi. My name is John Duri. I'm a PhD student at Technical University of Kenya, a PhD in Information Knowledge Management. I'm an e-learning and knowledge management consultant. Happy to make a contribution to this convening. Over to you, Chair. Thank you.
Thanks so much and feel very welcome. Dr. Kefasimo.
Good afternoon, colleagues. Let me put on my mic, my camera. Good afternoon.
Good afternoon.
Yes, my name is Kefasimo. I am the executive director, Annie, based at Moi University, but I also work in Moi University. Following what we had yesterday, very exciting, very engaging. I'm looking forward to today, yet another day for engagement. So you're most welcome. Thank you.
Thanks so much, Dr. Karibu sana. We go to Madam Mary Kiguru, who is also the chair of this session. She'll be the one leading us in the discussions for this convening. Madam Mary, Karibu.
Asante. Good afternoon, everybody. I'm glad to be here and to meet this group. I can already identify a few people we were with in the last session. So welcome back again. I work I'm a founder in a faculty enrichment program, but I also work for a bridge to employment program that is called EFAC. And I'm delighted to be moderating this session on public partnerships because it's at the core of my heart, how you engage the academia with the industry. So I'm excited to have everybody in the space.
Most welcome, Chair. Karibu sana. I'm also seeing my teacher, Professor Peter Baraza. Professor Baraza, karibu.
Sorry about that. Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Peter Barasa. I am a professor of education, a member of ANI, a long-time member of ANI, and also the Kenya chapter liaison officer for Sera. And I was yesterday in and out because of other exigencies of duty, but I promise that today I'll stay in and be part of today's convening. Thank you so much.
Karibu sana, Prof. Then after Prof, I'm seeing our other moderator, Steve Akoth. Kindly introduce yourself.
Thank you very much, Your Excellency, our chair. We are always happy to have you because you bring democracy in our midst. My name is Omar Akoth, and I'm a champion. A champion is somebody who is a slave. So I'm a slave of Joey and his colleagues, thank you, including Pauline.
Are you sure you are a slave? Thank you so much, Steve, and karibu sana. Then I see Tabitha Rangara. Kindly introduce yourself and welcome.
Good afternoon. Thank you very much, Chair. My name is Tabitha, as you've seen. I'm the team leader for distance learning at the Catholic University of Eastern Africa. I'm very happy to be here.
Thanks so much, Tabitha. I saw one of your communications to us earlier requesting for some information. I don't know whether we did good to you. If we didn't, we apologize. Then we have Nelson Mandela Ogema. Nelson.
Nelson is still trying to connect, so he may not be.
He may not be there. Then I'm seeing SUA Inc. So whoever that could be, kindly introduce yourself. SUA.
Hello, Dr. Joey, and hello, friends. My name is Erastus Mongare. I'm with an organization called Startup Africa, where we focus on youth entrepreneurship We were founded in the US, but our work is primarily in Africa, currently in Kenya, Uganda, Tanzania. We have also done work with TVETs in 6 other African countries. This year, we are celebrating our 10th year anniversary, this Thursday, actually. And Matters Partnership is an area that I'm always delighted to be part of, and happy to be here to contribute, to share, and to connect. Thank you.
Most welcome, Erastus. And sorry, colleagues, this is a bilateral between me and Erastus. Erastus, kindly let's meet 5:20 after this meeting. Thank you so much. Then I'm seeing also Passenger Conferencing. Passenger Conferencing, if at all that person also needs to introduce him or herself. I think that's the last one as per now. Passenger Conferencing.
He may not be there. He's our host, technologically. But his name is Elijah.
Thank you so much, Pauline. I can see that Jacqueline has already come in. I was just standing in for Jacqueline so that we save on time. And so I would like now to hand over the program back to Jacqueline Nyerere. Jacqueline, introduce yourself and then take over from there. Thank you.
Thank you very much, James, for stepping in, and sorry to everyone for coming in late. I was trying to connect. I don't know, my mouse just hung, so I couldn't click anywhere until I had to restart the computer. But that's no good excuse. I'm happy to see you all. My name is Jacqueline Nyerere from Kenyatta University, also a member of ANI that is co-hosting this program. You're most welcome. I think after the introductions now, we are going to have some welcoming remarks. But I can show the program. If you allow me, I can share my screen so that you are able to refresh. I know you already have this program, but essentially we will take some 10 minutes for welcoming remarks from here. And then we will have Steve contextualizing this convening, discussions of guiding policy-based questions, which we shared with you earlier, will be led by our session chair, Mary Kiguru. We'll have a short health break, just about 10 minutes at 16, after which then we will sum up the policy recommendations, still led by the session chair. We will then have an introduction to the participatory impact pathway analysis by Steve at 16:30 to 50. After which then we'll have our closing remarks. So that's how the program runs. And we hope that through this convening, we will be able to go deeper into the discussions that we've had on the sessions that have passed, the 2 previous convenings, and specifically also focus on the questions that have been shared. So allow me now to welcome Pauline to chair the, to give our welcome remarks. Pauline.
Thank you very much, Jacqueline. I had already introduced myself, but I'm quite aware that a few others have joined in after I introduced myself. So it's a very good afternoon to every one of us. My name is Pauline Gilmore. I am a co-host of this house, together with my colleagues at ANI. Allow me first to acknowledge ANI's Executive Director, Professor Kefa Simon, and your team, James, Jacqueline. I believe others will be joining, but we are always happy to do this work together. I also want to acknowledge Steve, Dr. Steve Akoth, who is our technical advisor and leading us through this methodology that has been innovated at PASGA that brings people together in a very safe space to talk about evidence around a particular policy issue and how that evidence can be taken up to inform better policy making. And that is what we are doing. So with us, we also have our very able chair for this afternoon, Mary Kiguru. And just going through the introductions, I was very delighted to hear that we have such a beautiful mix, a rich mix, people from academia and people from the industry. And what we are trying to do is to look at policies around how the industry and the academia was supported or can be supported during pandemic environments, just like what we have been going through since last year. And that is the essence of this afternoon. I will not get deep into it because we have our experts taking us through, but really this is our house, and each and every one of you, we do really appreciate spending time this afternoon with us to share your insights, to share what you know, and what we need to take up to the next level. We are almost at the tail end of our stakeholder engagement with the academia, with people in the interested in what we've been doing, and generating evidence that we now take forward to start engaging with our policy decision makers. So I want to say we are grateful on behalf of PASGA, and we look forward to a very enriching time and very rich insights into the area of policies around PPP. So I want to give this back to Jackie to take us through to the next level. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Pauline. James, do I welcome you back to give some welcoming remarks? I know you've chaired the introduction section, but maybe it's just 1 minute or two to also welcome the members.
Thanks so much, Jackie. I want to join Pauline in the welcome remarks to mainly welcome on a long journey from when we started, and now we are getting to the most interesting part. We already had the convening yesterday for the access group, and now we are going into deeper conversations within the 3 thematic areas. And for today, we are looking at the public-private partnerships. And as Pauline has mentioned, we already discussed some of the impacts of COVID-19 onto different facets of higher education, especially access, equity, quality, and also on postgraduate training. And today, before we look at postgraduate training tomorrow, we are looking at, in a slight way, how the pandemic impacted on the private sector partners, but also on the role that the private sector played in supporting higher education institutions to respond to the pandemic. And this will be specifically with regard to the 3 areas that, the 4 areas we are working on, that is access, quality, equity, and postgraduate training. How can the private sector, or how did the private sector engage with the universities in responding to the pandemic within those 3 areas? And I think we are looking at this with regard to what we have already seen in the convenings and from literature, that government support is important. They are doing their best, but it is not sufficient. So there is need for a multi-stakeholder approach to also augment what the government is doing. And I think this is where the space for the private sector to engage is coming in from. And for this convening, we are actually looking at the policy landscape. The private sector could have been engaging with the university, but what is the policy landscape to facilitate this? I think this is what the chair will possibly zero in on as she introduces the session, so that we see what policies exist to enable the participation of the private sector or the participation of the universities in engaging with the private sector. I think I shouldn't say so much about it because I know that the chair will very much dwell onto that. So on behalf of Annie, the director who is here, the members who are here, and all colleagues who have joined, and our colleagues from PASGA, I very warmly welcome you, and thanks so much. So I give it back to you, Jacqueline.
Thank you, James. We're now moving on to the session on contextualizing this third convening by Steve Court. Steve, take the floor.
Jacqueline, I can't see Steve on the list of, I don't know whether he is logged out.
Sorry, did he drop off? Steve?
Never spread rumors. Who is he spreading rumors, logging out, dropping off? Surely.
Somebody is spoiling your good name.
Yeah, can't a man think? I was just thinking, that's why but thank you very much, Dr. Joey. Thank you very much, Dr. Nyerere, and the session chair. It's quite a pleasure always to be here. I was adjusting my tie. I realized I dropped some particle of rice on it during my lunch. So I think we're in a very good place, as Dr. Joey said. And maybe it's important to put this in the trajectory, also to help the chair. So the essence of Utafiti Sera House is to pose two questions. The first question is, what is the prevailing policy environment on an issue that is material to us? And here the issue that is material to us is partnership between private sector and university. So that's the first question. That's the material policy issue to us. The second question that the House asks itself is, what is the place of evidence in informing that policy, either in the way it is framed, unfolding, or implemented? And now in a particular context of COVID-19, and we've had a history of partnership between private sector and of course, the universities. And of course, sometimes universities are also private. So sometimes it's PP, it doesn't just mean private, public, it also means private, which is all right. So we would like to ask ourselves a question. In this moment of COVID-19, what is a prevailing policy infrastructure? And how can that policy infrastructure be enhanced so as to promote better access for higher education, quality higher education, and enhance equity in the higher education space? Focusing quite clearly on this COVID-19 moment. And from the various convenings, we thought that maybe we may want to think about one particular policy element as an entry point. And that policy element that we thought would be useful to guide us is the digitization policy. So the first thing would be to scan around and ask whether there's a digitization policy. And digitization policy is one of those that have really created a convergence between the private sector and the universities, because the digital technology is developed in the private sector outside the university, and then the university wants to absorb it. And there are many questions here. In the last convenings, one of the questions was that the private sector sometimes does not feel appreciated enough or acknowledged, or even more important, they don't feel that their patents get protected when they partner with the university. Another question that came up was that sometimes the university innovates, but for university to shift its science and technological innovation into an applied technology to take place, it takes so long, so that by the time this is moved into an applied technology that can be used commercially, it's too late. Sometimes also there are innovations which take place outside the university, in the private sector. And then the private sector brings this back to the university from intellectual collaboration. Either universities resist it on the account of methodology, or sometimes it again takes so long and the university opens up a whole new experiment altogether. So these are, for example, disjunctures. But one last element also of private, public sector, particularly universities partnership that is important, is on the content of training. The private sector has been keen on particular disposition of skills that ought to be produced by the universities, but sometimes they feel that the university is not doing that. Attitude. I have had the privilege of working in both a private sector setting and for public sector in the name of civil society. And I kept pushing some of my staff members and tell them, don't think as a public sector on this one, think as a private sector. And sometimes private sector has challenged us that we in the universities do not produce graduates that have the mindset of competitive framing and thinking that is required for operationalization, survival, and competing in the private sector. So therefore, the debate here is around practice and policy, and really seeing how evidence that emanates out of practice gets its place in the framing of policies. And this house is keen to make sure that, especially in this moment of COVID-19, the partnership between private sector and public sector, especially through the universities, and more so through digitization policies, do not increase the gap of inequality in terms of access, or inequity in terms of opportunities open, or quality. So although the questions of equality, quality, and equity were emphatically dealt with by group one, they still remain the core ingredients, the recall visionary ingredients that we should use as yardsticks of guiding the conversation. So the chair is going to help us through this conversation through a couple of focus questions. Those questions overlap. And once the chair is done guiding us in the first circuit, then I will be honored to come back and discuss with you the second segment of thought around theory of change through an instrument we call PIPA. So with that, I thank you very much really for the privilege of being part of this conversation, and I give it back to the chair. Thank you very much. Back to you, Chair.
Thank you very much, Steve. I now welcome Mary Kiguru, who is taking us through the next session, who is actually the chair of this session. Mary, karibu.
Asante sana, Jackie. I thank Pauline, Joey, and Professor Akoth. You inspire me and give me motivation that actually a change is happening. As I think this is the beginning of creating an ecosystem where the academia work in partnership with the industry, something that we have desired for so many years. To start us off, I want to make a request. First, that we have somebody, maybe Jacqueline, we can get somebody who will monitor the chat and anyone putting up their hands, so that if I'm not able to see, at least I can be alerted that somebody has asked a question on the chat or someone has put up their hand. Secondly, I'll ask us to go to our name, and where there is more, rename yourself. Please, you have your name there, but at the end, put the organization you work for so that we are aware who is in the room and which organization they represent. If it is a university, let it be clear it is academia. From industry, just state like the organization you work for. Then at least we can get to know who is in the room and the representation we have. If we have actually someone from the public sector, please, we'd also want to know that you're from the public sector, not academia, not the private sector industry, but really working for the government. We want to know who is here in the space. So take a moment and do that on that. When you take the mouse to your name, there will be something more on the more click and rename yourself. In the chat box, you can do a bit of an introduction of who you are and also why you are in this particular space, what you would really like to get out of this space. And with that, I welcome everyone into this particular space. This is a continuation of the discussions that we have had. We have had 2 convenings, and we had a session, a very interesting session yesterday. From the last session and even what came out of yesterday, we know that there were opportunities where the academia interacted a lot with the private sector, and the private sector offered a lot to the academia. The output of this from the last convening, we realized that the opportunities have not been optimized. And maybe only a few institutions got these opportunities because of a lacking of an enabling environment to support this kind of a thing and even to scale up, particularly in the public sector. So as we go on today and we do our questioning whether there is existing really a digitization policy. During the pandemic, I think with all this engagement, was there a guiding policy? And we're saying that probably there existed one, maybe we don't know about it. So today we explore and find out whether this framework exists. I think it's even a matter of clarification, something that came out during the yesterday discussion. When you're talking about education, it's a public good, whether offered through private or public universities. So when we are looking at the private sector, we will not be looking at private universities as a private sector. We are going to be looking at it as a university that is offering a public good. I hope that is okay, Professor Akoth, to put it that way, that whether private or public university, they're offering a private good and want to know whether they are equally represented in this particular policy that exists. So to take us straight into this, we have several questions and our time may be limited, but let's see. Responding to these questions and seeing whether there is really a policy framework that exists to support the public-private partnerships, how we engage with the industry. As an industry player, you are looking at yourself like, what did you offer the universities? And the universities are looking at what did you receive from the public, from the private sector, from industry. But is there existing policy within the institution or even nationally that supports this kind of engagement? So welcome everybody, and please take time, make sure that you review your name, and in the chat box, please introduce yourself, the organization you belong in, and the role you play in that particular organization. So to start our discussion this afternoon, let's think about digitization and how you engaged with the private sector as universities, or how the private sector engaged with the university. Is there an existing national digitization policy framework that supports how we engage with the universities? We just take a moment to think and then we can respond. You can put up your hand, but you can also, if you're having challenges with internet, you can put your answer in the chat box. Do we have an existing national digitization policy that supports public-private partnerships with our universities?
Hello.
Hi.
Yeah, Tom here. Yeah, thanks. So yes, and thanks for this question. It is good to have again see everyone here. So looking at what is already existing in terms of the policy framework from the private sector, seems to be there exists a very thin line in terms of whether it's very clear to demarcate and confirm that there is existing policy framework for the digitization. However, when I look at like we have the data policy, right? And the data policy is basically to make sure that, there is a clear cut in terms of what the government expects from how to keep data and what, how, where, and, to secure it in terms of the personal information. Yeah. So to me, that would be the only thing that I feel exists that cuts across. How we use it, maybe we have not really used it so well in terms of making it proper into our advantage in terms of both sectors. Private institutions, for example, have a lot of data based on the kind of engagements they do and the kind of products and things that they do. But now when the government comes in and tying into defining policy in terms of how data should be managed, then there is that correlation. So maybe what now I feel should be a point of convergence in terms of is how do we bring in the private and institutions and the public universities, for example, to utilize this data for the sake of propelling it and making sure that it serves the purpose of the populace that is meant to use it for future.
Thank you. Any other contribution? So we have a data policy that guides that guides us. In this, that's a national policy, as we have heard. Maybe I can confirm from a technical person if they can be pinning the person who is speaking so that we see who is speaking.
Okay, sorry.
Yeah.
Yeah, so it's obvious. I was speaking to data protection policy.
Data protection policy, yeah?
Yes.
Yeah. So we have a data protection policy that does exist, that governs how you interact with other organizations. Is that specific to the university, engaging with university, or is that general for engagement in any partnership?
So it's a bit general. It's basically to make sure that the institutions that are privileged to have a lot of data by virtue of whatever they are doing, for example, telecommunication as a case, for example, that they don't misuse this data. But at the same time, this data, if probably properly framed, can also help the institutions to be able now to analyze and maybe extract a lot of value from them and be able to use it to make some decisions that are data driven.
Okay, thank you so much. Any other policy that we know exists around this particular space on digitization? So we have the data protection policy. We're glad that that does exist. So we did engage a lot with the universities as private sector. Was there any other policy that guided how we interacted or how we offered our services to the universities? Was there a guiding framework? We can also, okay, Tom.
Sorry, I was not speaking.
All right, I think I saw Tom wanting to talk, or was it Brian?
Sorry, not me. I guess my daughter shouted and that would have triggered.
Oh. Okay, all right.
Chair, from the literature we've gathered, if at all I can come in.
Okay.
We are seeing that the ministry responsible for ICT and also through the Communication Authority actually regulates this sector. And Kenya has developed a number of documents like the National ICT Master Plan and the National Broadband Strategy. And also in terms of legislation, there is the Access to Information Act and the Data Protection Bill that Tom mentioned. And I think what could be then the next question is how universities, whether the university, we have a number of stakeholders here from the universities, whether the universities are aware of these policies, because I can see from the data gathered that the policy frameworks are there, but are the universities aware of them, and to what extent are they exploiting them with regard to digitalization?
Yeah, that's a good question, Joey. Do the universities know that these frameworks exist? So from the universities, you engage with the private sector. Do you know that these frameworks exist?
Mary, Professor Barasa's hand is up.
Yeah, thank you, Pauline.
Professor Baraza?
Yes, thank you, Pauline. I would like to take up from where Joey left. The truth of the matter is that, yes, the universities are aware of those policies, but I think cognizant of the fact that during the period of the pandemic, there was almost inertia in almost all the other facets of engagement, except in the areas of health sciences, so that those who are interested in the issues of protecting society from the pandemic, those who are interested in manufacturing and development of the vaccine, probably were more engaged in that. Those who are involved in development of PEPs and production of things like soaps, sanitizers, some of them worked with private partnerships to try and develop this, and we could see that coming up in the media quite a bit. But in the other areas of research, that was a time when everybody almost went to sleep, even though we knew such policies existed. Thank you.
Thank you, Prof. Anyone from the university whose university engaged with the private sector? So we are seeing like from there were engagement in the health sciences, there were partnerships, and there was a kind of a guiding framework around that. Was there, Prof? Or did you use the existing framework?
I think there was, in the sense that I think in issues of health sciences, we could see a relationship between the Ministry of Health and institutions like Kenyatta University developing certain Ministry of Health and some universities, and I would say a number of universities, but not that I'm aware of in other areas.
Okay, all right. So when the rest of us were in academia, the universities, did you have any engagements with the existing framework, like on data protection, and how the Ministry of the ICT Ministry regulates how we interact in the virtual space in accessing information and protecting data?
Chair?
Yes, Professor Simwa?
Yes, this is Simwa. I wouldn't say very authoritatively that I know of this policy, specific policy was working along what, but I do recall a time when through our ICT Directorate, we were encouraged to register with the telcos so that we would get bundles. for the online platforms that we were to use. So that being the case, I may want to say, yes, there must be some policy that would have then led these organizations, and of course they are private companies, to work with the universities. I need more literature to be sure about what specific. And then I am yet also to know exactly the details, but we also have an organization called Kenneth. Kenneth. I know it has an arrangement with the universities and in relation to provision for data or a platform from which then universities can reach their learners virtually. So really, there must be some policies around that link that is brought up. Thank you. I submit.
Okay, thank you, Prof.
Sorry, Chair, there is a comment on the chat from John Duri. Would you like to look at it?
Yes. If I can find where my chat is right now. So we have John Duri says, perhaps it would also be useful to distinguish between digitization, converting data, documents, and processes from analog to digital, and digitalization, transforming business processes by leveraging digital technologies, ultimately yielding opportunities for efficiencies. Yeah, thank you, Duri. I think we will, in this particular question, we can see, do we have also maybe a digitalization policy as Nduri is defining it, yeah, and as it's defined. So even as you're thinking about that, do we have, okay, we have the data protection policy that is on the digitization, but also now converting the processes. Do we have something on that as well? Let's think about that as well. So I know that most of the organizations that we have here that were in the public, in the private sector, last time they were offering those particular platforms, yeah, technology platforms, and they are offering them, was there a policy framework that guided how the universities were adopting these platforms?
Chair, there is another contribution from Dr. Ragara on the chat.
Okay. The existing framework pre-COVID was the pillar anchored in Vision 2030 on PPPs, which includes infrastructure, direct financing, student housing, etc. We were able to access donations for e-education infrastructure as part of digital transformation. I'm not sure if there's a definite policy, but I've seen documents anchored on Vision 2030. So we are also saying that Vision 2030 provides a kind of a framework, but we need to know whether there are any policies around that particular framework that is defined within the Vision 2030. And we're talking about, this is pre-COVID.
Chair, if you allow me.
Yes, John?
Yeah, thanks. So this is what I would say regarding digitalization. I'm aware other sectors or other arms of government have had policies on digitalization and digitization. Talk about the ministry, let's say the Ministry of Health, of Lands.
Yeah.
We have seen they did digitization and digitalization, whereby we now have Ardhi Sasa. All our documents are on land ownership documents are on a portal. The specific parcels of land have GPS coordinates, and it's even now enabling, I'm told they will open it up soon, where you can do your search on the platform and get your results and even transfer land the way the NTSA have done when it comes to transfer registration of motor vehicles.
Yeah.
Then also, I think there has been a policy on digital payments, for instance, because for the telecommunications providers who are mentioned by Tom earlier to operate in the way they do, to even get into lending and getting profits, there has been some policy. But for the universities per se, I think we have gone a step further to begin practicing digitization, but there's an explicit, exact policy on that. I think it's a gap. Maybe we might want to make a case for as a result of these convenings and discussions. I stand guided. That is my feeling.
Yeah, that's what John is saying, that probably there is no framework like we are seeing in other ministries like NTSA or in the Ministry of Land, that they have both for digitization and digitalization. So that's what we are questioning this afternoon. Now, looking at the universities, we are seeing we have data protection because universities generate a lot of data, and this can govern how they actually protect the data so that their students' data, their teaching faculty data is protected. We are seeing that the ministry, the ICT, the Ministry of Information and Technology has also regulations. We saw that there is actually an office that actually has some regulations on accessing information and data. Now, the question here was, are universities aware of the policies that are existing? But there is also another policy that most of the organizations that deal with students and young people were being asked, is there a safeguarding policy? Even as we engage with our students, with other organizations, we have a safeguarding policy that exists. Maybe we can also question that. On this, to register with Telcom, for the online platforms, I think that is where digitalization comes in. As we adapt different different platforms where we are engaging students, is there a policy guiding how we acquire these platforms, who is offering them, how they can be offered, and how the data protection policy applies on that? We also have KNET that provides the bandwidth to the universities, but last year during the pandemic, they did provide the platform for universities to reach out to their learners, for those that didn't have platforms. What was the guiding framework around this? Because this is a collaboration between the government and the KNET people. Then we have the Vision 2030 that we need to question. It provides a framework, but are there policies that govern how this framework is implemented? So this existed before the pre-COVID, the pandemic, and probably it should have now applied during the pandemic season. Are there any policies around that? So, and then we are hearing from John, there may not be an existing digitization or digitalization policy governing the universities. Is there someone from the university probably that engaged and probably found maybe there is a policy somewhere? A national policy, that is. It's from any ministry. You know, we engage as departments, like if you have the School of Health Sciences, you are interacting with different ministries and different organizations. So probably there is a Ministry of Health, like we have had in the Ministry of Health, there's a lot of engagement because people were being very innovative. We have what probably Kirti also offers when there is that info, that there's that innovation. We can think about that. What policies exist? Yeah. And when you think about interaction, yeah.
Chair?
Yes, Prof.
Thank you, Chair.
I think I have Prof. Akov. Yeah.
Thank you very much for the guidance. I think we need to explore the ICT policy. The ICT policy is a very old policy, and it was last amended in, I think, 2019. And as part of its core core content, it promises to expand innovation that will enable as many Kenyan institutions as possible to use ICT as a space for education. And that is both at the levels of the lower basic education levels and the higher education. And then it suggests something else, which is not just the bandwidth, but it talks about the bandwidth and the equipment. And these are two different things. The bandwidth in terms of connectivity and infrastructure, and equipment in terms of access to laptops, access to university, e-learning, teaching materials, and so on. My only concern is that that promise has not gone hand in hand with the enabling tax regime, because the subsequent finance acts, which we get after every budget, do not seem to be giving rebates on ICT materials that are used primarily for education. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Okay. So we need to explore more on that. I think the ministry has a lot and it has not delivered on its promise. So we're not taking advantage of that. I do remember at some point they offered subsidized laptops to the students, but it didn't last for long. I think it's only for a while. So they provide bandwidth. I think they work closely with Kenneth, and they provide equipment. Thank you, Prof.
Chair, I was going to say something.
Yes, Prof.
This is Simwa. I was going to say, and this is just about contextualizing issues. The notion of e-government. Remember the notion of e-government and when it came through.
Yes.
I think it was way back. It has been, I remember it was the days of, was it the days of when Governor Mutua was the government spokesperson or something?
Yes.
Which means policy was there. And I know even for those of us in education who know this, we have this, what was this platform that was being used to give, was used to assess whether schools, whether principals have the right number of students in their schools. Was it NEMIS or was it IFMIS or what was the other acronym? So policy, in my view, there must be something there. Only that, I think I like the question of were we as players in the sector aware of that? Becomes the other issue. And even who is trying to interpret that policy given the pandemic situation? That becomes another challenge. Because yes, policy is there, like the ICT policy has been there, but who would be helping the universities, particularly from the ministry side of education, to then begin to interpret? And by the way, colleagues, I don't know whether I'm right or wrong, but if you look at the Commission for University Education and the template it used to develop ODEL policy, or is it framework, a good number of the questions that are being asked there are really resonating with what is in the ICT. Thank you. I think that's my submission, Chair, for now.
Okay, thank you. So we are actually asking now, the private sector can respond to this because they also seem to be very aware of the policies that influence how they interact with other organizations that include the universities. And this was very applicable during the pandemic. We've had the data protection policy, and I think it was very instrumental in how the relationships were being developed and how people were interacting. I think one of the biggest questions in the health sector, when they tried to have to create a common platform, was how do we have a policy framework that protects our clients from data from our clients when you're having a lot of data. Now we are asking the universities, are you aware of the policies that govern how you interact with the private sector? So we have seen what Prof. Akoth has said. The ICT provide the framework. There exist policies, but have we implemented these policies? There have been promises from the ministry, but probably the reason we don't know that the promise has not been delivered is because we are not aware they are there as universities. There is the master plan, I believe, that was also developed, the ICT master plan, that has also governed like the presidential digital platform that engages university students. So is there a framework for that? Maybe that will take me to the next question. But I don't want to close anybody who knows of a national policy that is available from any ministry that we interact with. Remember, as academia, we are representing several industries, all the industries in the country, and all the ministries have a policy that governs how you interact. So we have looked at the Ministry of Information. We know that there are policies in the Ministry of Health. For those in transportation, probably from the Ministry of Transport, there is something. So just think, are there other policy frameworks that governed how we interacted, particularly during the pandemic, even post the pandemic?
So Mary, before we move on to the next question, I want to provoke some thinking around two areas of digitization or digitalization.
Yeah.
And this one is, we've talked about equipment, bandwidth, but there was also expressed need in terms of the content itself, that is the digitization, and also the literacy, digital literacy. We saw, and we continue to see there is an issue in usage of the technology. But tied to that is the capacity, the skills of the educators and the students to engage in the digital space. So I'm provoking thinking around that to see if there was any, or there has been any policies that guided or exist in relation to that.
Okay.
And I also wanted to mention that we're still in the pandemic. So yes, when the pandemic struck, we were called to think, but we are still living the pandemic. So we need to make reflections on whether anything has changed, even as we have continued to experience the pandemic. Thank you.
Members, you can respond to that.
Chair, there's a hand which is up. Dr. Janet Chemeli.
Dr. Chemeli, yeah?
Yes, thank you so much. So I would like to just add on something about the existence of the policies. Okay, I'm not aware of any policy existing, but there are those initiatives like the Vision 2030, and there is something on the 2013 Science and Technology and Innovation Act. So that act, which has also helped Kenya to realize the recurring long-term visions for improved economic growth. And although there has been the existence of that Vision 2030 and that 2013 Innovation Act, there is an uncertainty about how the legal processes by which the contracts and the tenders are procured and are awarded. So maybe we need to look at how if there will be a way on which the legal policies which can help to identify how the contracts and the tenders are being procured and how they are being awarded, and also there are no frameworks on how the affordability and the value of money from the government and the consumer, between the government and the consumer of these digital services. Maybe it was not actually conducted. The affordability and the value of money that the government of Kenya and the consumer received were not adequately conducted. So maybe something needed to be done about that, so that we know exactly, so that it will improve equity and access of the digitalization. Thank you.
Okay, I think we'll also look at this later in another question on the products, how we actually whether there are policy frameworks that guide the innovations and all that. Thank you, Dr. Chemeli. So we are still responding to what Pauline provoked. Has anything changed in how we operate since the pandemic? Do you feel like anything has changed, or it's business as usual? You know, in the pandemic, we all jumped into the space. So are we continuing with what we did during the pandemic, or have we gone back to pre-pandemic? Have we adjusted? Did we learn anything new? And is there guiding policy around what we are doing new?
Chair.
Yes.
Chair.
Yes, Professor Simo.
Allow me to come in there, but again,
Professor Simo,
please unmute.
You've gone on mute.
Oh, sorry. I don't know if in this forum, I'm sure we have experts on policy. What constitutes policy? For me, it is something that we also need to engage with, right?
Yes.
So deeply so that it is also made clear even to all the players, because depending on what is stated as policy, an authoritative allocation of resource, when a leader stands by the roadside and promulgates a statement, does that become policy? I'm raising this issue because of what Dr. Ngima raised on issues of digital literacy. One would want to question whether even what we are calling ICT policy or digital policy, does it cater for digital literacy also? Because it is those gaps that we have within the policies that exist that then create so much problems for many people. Because, I mean, those who don't know much about policy, if policy is not as explicit, end up misinterpreting what needs to be done. And therefore, it is really left to, if, you know, chance or luck, right? Yeah,
yes.
Thank you.
Thank you, Prof. All right. Okay, is Bula talking? Tom, did you want to say something? I saw like Tom was talking.
Yes, I saw a question like, has anything changed in how we operate since the pandemic?
Yeah.
So there's a big shift. Speaking to the private sector, there's a big shift in terms of how we operate, and it's become a norm in terms of working from home, unlike before. And we've seen quite a number of organizations now accepting working from home as a normal thing. Because what came out clearly is that the productivity was never really an issue during the pandemic, meaning guys were still able to deliver. So some companies have seen making it as part and parcel of their internal policy. And I'll speak now to us as BMT. So we are a new organization, and we're starting now to bring in a few students. So like we have a student from Maseno who is doing IT, right? And is in first year. So it's an internal deliberate decision to start holding this person from the time they join. Because to us, one of the things that is coming out clearly, and I think this has been spoken to several times, is a gap in terms of what is what is produced vis-a-vis what the private sector want to consume. So you want to make sure that someone understands everything in-house from the time they're holding. And the pandemic to some degree have really helped on this course, because now, because all of us are working from home, even these students are able to actually be part and parcel of these runnings as they continue with their studies. So to some degree, again, it has really helped along that line.
All right, that is interesting. So some things have changed because students have always had to be in space. They don't have to be in space. They can work remotely. So the question is there a policy framework that how you engage the students? Because like now you're engaging a first year student from their first year. So how can they, is there a supportive environment for this kind of a thing, Tom? Or you just engage students from, do you work specifically with universities with an existing policy?
Not at all. So this is you take like you try to enroll a student who have approached you and want to be supported to grow their career along a certain path. So yes, as you speak to it, it's clear there is no defined policy, and therefore at this juncture, maybe the institutions need to probably define, or partners need to agree in terms of, when you're doing this, this is what we expect. This is how you look at it. This is how we also assess, because at one point, we'll expect the institutions to assess, the way we used to have the traditional internship where lecturers would come and assess how you're doing. So how do they assess right now? So I think on the private sector, and private sectors are fairly agile and they easily adopt into so many things. I guess we just need to define a policy in terms of what are the rules of engagement with the new mode of operation. Yeah.
Yeah.
All right. Thank you, Tom. Did I hear someone else?
John's hand is up.
Chair, okay. This is Joey.
Joel?
In addition to what Tom is presenting or discussing, I'm seeing further literature, because I've also got, I'm also opening the part of the synthesis that we've done. And there is literature suggesting here that Kenya's digital economy has emerged as the fourth fastest growing in the world after China, Malaysia, and Bolivia. After those three countries, we have Kenya as the fastest growing in terms of the digital economy. And with higher education, there is indication that the government has supported by laying backbone for the ICT infrastructure, and is now connecting libraries and providing digital resources for the universities. And there is even a policy, a presidential something, let me see, for the institutions particularly. It is a presidential digital talent program, where several IT internship opportunities are given, including for postgraduate students. So the same question I was asking, are we in the universities aware of this? Are we aware that we are actually the best in Africa? Because those countries listed in terms of the digital economy, none in Africa is above us. and what environment has actually enabled us to be there. So I think the universities could try to see themselves within this context, and then we can try to see the private sector in that context too. Thank you, Chair.
Okay. I think what we are hearing from this particular question is that there exist policies. The question is, are we aware of these policies? So I think that's what we need to ask ourselves. Are we aware of the opportunities we have that govern how we relate and how we relate with the private sector, how we take advantage of the private sector, but most importantly, the engagement itself. How is it governed? So there exist these policies, and I think Professor Sima is also asking us to look at the policies and see, are they explicit? Yeah, that's the question he's asking us. Yeah, from Pauline, has something changed? I think things have changed. A lot has changed, particularly how the private sector is engaging our students. The question is, do we have frameworks within the institutions that support this kind of engagement so that it is meaningful to the student, to the university, and to the organizations that we are engaging? And that takes me to the next question. So when Tom was talking, so he said he doesn't know about the internal policies that exist within the universities, but maybe within the private sector, they do have the rules of engagement, which means from the private sector, probably there are, yeah? So let's look at this. So do we have, as institutions, both the private sector and the higher education institutions, do we have digitization frameworks, policy frameworks, or even digitalization framework, how we adapt this technology that govern how we engage with each other?
Chair, John's hand was up. I don't know whether.
Oh, I didn't see that, John.
There was a time John Duri's hand was up. Maybe he wanted to say something.
Okay. Before. All right. I'm not able to see when the hands are up. I had asked whether somebody can monitor that for me and to let me know when someone's hand is up. I'm only able to see when you start talking, I can see who is talking.
Yeah, thanks, Prof, for drawing Chair's attention. And Chair, we understand you only have two sets of eyes, a set of eyes you can see.
Thank you, John.
So, yeah, so my contribution is to do with, I've put up some links in the chat about policies and legal frameworks as a focus area of the Kenya Innovation Agency.
Okay.
And also they have partnerships and linkages as another key area. I've put the link up there, but when you go to those those links, you don't find a lot of what has happened.
Okay.
In terms of concrete documents. Now, what is of interest here is that this agency is domiciled under the Ministry of Education. And they have been doing a lot. In fact, Dr. Mwansa, the CEO, the executive, the director general, is credited with establishing the Nairobi Innovations Week that runs annually. So not any concrete answer or any specific document to signpost the plenary to, but just seeing that, is it an area we could reach out to the agency and see if we can get any specific documents, or if they are not there, I think this could be a window for us to engage, given that it's under the Ministry of Education. Yes. Over to you, thanks.
Yes, agreed with you, John, on that, yeah? If nothing exists here, that means people are not participating, yeah? And we can also explore, is there something that does exist? Okay, thank you. Is there anyone else's hand that was up? All right.
From the link that was shared,
yes,
I've seen they have only one document which looks like probably a draft policy framework.
Okay.
Let me just open just a minute. It is a Ministry of Higher Education, Science and Technology, a policy framework for science, technology, and innovation. But there's nothing much. I'm not very sure if it is a draft or not, though it is written sessional paper without a number.
Okay.
Yeah, so it is a little bit unclear.
All right, so we can question that. I think we have noted that. Then we can look at that and see what kind of framework it provides as far as innovations are concerned. So within our institutions, do we have existing policies governing how we engage with the private sector? We can start with anyone from the private sector. We have already heard what Tom said, that there's some internal policies within his organizations that govern how they are interacting with the students. They are providing these opportunities for students. So I guess this is the interaction with the individuals, but not with the institutions as yet. So in the higher institution, do we have any framework that guides how you interact or how you engage? Let's hear from those who are from higher education. I know that from more universities, they have had engagement with the industry, or they're having incubation centers. I'm not very sure about the Catholic University. So maybe we can share what it is that we have that is existing in our spaces. Do we have something that guides how we engage with both the public and the private sector? And yeah.
Chair, this is John Dury again, if you allow me.
Yes.
Yesterday, we made a submission to the effect that we made a submission touching on SDGs, and actually there is a comment in the chat about are SDGs considered as frameworks? And I think SDG number 17, the last one, is explicit on partnership. So is there a way we can say that is domesticated because it's they are universally agreed and adopted goals, or that one will be stretching the imagination too much? Just a loud thought from my side.
Yeah, is it a framework? Are SDGs considered a framework?
Chair, if I may, SDG as part of a global instrument is considered a commitment. Now, you can only go back home and do a framework based on the commitment, but it is a commitment, not a framework. Thank you, Chair.
Yeah. So you can actually reference the SDG and develop your own framework around this, but itself is not a framework. That's what we are hearing.
No, Chair, but I can confirm that if we get to the ministry's website, Ministry of Education, there is a document that the ministry has tried to develop a framework from the SDGs. Education for Sustainable Development. I think I've come across a document of that nature, which means, yes, it is a commitment, as Coach Steve has said, but ordinarily, because it is coming from an international organization which Kenya subscribes, then the ministry normally would go ahead and appropriate or interpret to suit its conditions. So I know that within the Ministry of Education, there's something on, there's a framework on education for sustainable development.
So what we are saying that this is cascaded from the global level, then at national level, the government adapts this and develops a structure on how to implement the SDGs. Then from there, we get a framework that governs now how we do that at our universities, right? So we are saying there's a document that shows that in the Ministry of Education. We do have a lot to learn.
In fact, Chair, sorry, just to get in again, let us know that within the Ministry of Education, there is an office for UNESCO, which really, I think one of the other things that it does is always to pick what has been done internationally to be appropriated to suit the Kenyan situation. Yeah, thank you.
Okay, thank you, Prof, for that
May I speak
clarification.
as well, since you mentioned queer?
Yes, Dr. Rangara.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes, yes, I can.
Okay.
Yes, we can hear you.
Yes, so I'd also asked about the SDGs because I think they guide a lot, maybe internationally and cascading to the ministries. But what I want to mention about Square and partnerships. So as one of the professors said that the policies are not explicit, and this is a problem. So we have many offices and the PPPs are spread out. I know for like student housing, there are many agreements with the Dean of Students. And now that we're talking about this digitalization, from my office, we've had a lot of approaches from private partners who are mostly interested in online programs expansion. And of course, their business models, because they also need something out of it. So our approach is usually to go through the Office of Linkages, which is widened not only to digitalization, but to all partnerships or other universities or academics around the world. So they are all, I think the partnership policy is broad and not quite defined just to digital policy. So I wouldn't say there's a specific one for digital policy, but the one we used and we are still using even now is through the Academic Linkages Office.
Okay.
Thanks.
So we have the Linkages Office where the academia links to the industry. So they have like they have policies that how do you engage, which are broad and are not specific to the digital digitization. Okay. Any other existing policies within our institutions?
Yes, Chair.
Yes.
Let us not forget that within this period of the pandemic, actually almost all universities now have a very active directorate of open and distance learning, which is a clear indication that yes, something is being done.
If you have disappeared.
Yeah, sorry for that. My power. I had to fix my power. But I was going to say that in this pandemic period, we have had quite a bit of activity or a lot of activity towards, is it digitalization through those directorates of open and distance learning in most of the universities. And as I said yesterday, unfortunately for most of them, however ambitious they have been, always whatever they want to do towards digitalization is halted because of the costs involved. Thank you.
Okay, so we see that two things have happened. We have Linkages Office that link the university. On the learning side, we have the Directorate of Open and Distance Learning. And I think practically every university must have had something to do with that because they offered courses on the learning platform. So is there any other that has come up during the pandemic? But Prof, so with the Directorate, that means there are some governing policies within the institution, yeah? How that is managed.
Sorry, Tom here, just a quick one.
Yes.
So I know there's another program by the ICT ministry. It's called PDTP. I don't know if you guys have ever heard of it. Presidential Digital Training Program.
I think someone mentioned it earlier.
Okay.
Presidential?
Yes,
Digital
I did
training.
mention it.
Yeah, I think, someone had mentioned it earlier.
Okay, oh good, maybe it passed me. So maybe the conversion should be now, if are the universities aware, and how does it feed into, how do universities feed into it?
University. The question is, are they aware? I know that a few universities have been engaging, but how many of our universities are aware of this? And how does it feed? What framework do they have? So that would be a question probably with the linkages office. Okay. Any other existing frameworks? So I'm only seeing two here. We have the linkages office and we have the Directorate of Open and Distance Learning that provide a kind of a framework. Isn't there anything probably on innovation, the universities, or even within the private sector? Okay, so I take silence that we don't know of any other. So we can maybe see that, is there a gap that is existing here that is not addressed? The private sector, you can really think when you're engaging like with a university, would you want to see universities when you're engaging with the, we look at internship, which is they're providing our students. The universities, we are also looking what we offer so that we are preparing. Where would this really exist? Is it in distance learning is what we are offering? That is, how can they access education? That what we are talking about, equitable and quality education. Yeah, so the open and distance learning would probably address how that is going to be addressed, but also the funding mechanism. Yeah. So when we think of internships for our students, what frameworks do we have existing? Is there any? When we are looking at interactions, when it comes to learning space, that is, when you want to use your community as a learning space, is there a guiding framework for that? Do you have, yes?
I was going to say, and I really seek indulgence of all members, I think when it comes to universities and with communities or private sector, would say policies do exist of the face-to-face arrangement. Like, okay, you've talked about internship. I come from education. Policy on teaching practice and how we interact with the schools, yes, exists. But what we now don't have is policy that would then speak to the digitalized platform, right? Yeah. And let us also not forget there's the idea that people are also resisting change. You know, there are threats of some people saying, if I put my content onto the digital platform, will the university then find that I am no longer needed? So I then lose a job or something like that. So again, I don't know where to place that, but that is the other thing that comes out in this discussion. Thank you.
Yeah, I think there's a lot there, Prof. And I think we need to respond to that. That has been a very big question. So if the university uses me to develop that particular platform and put my content out there, how do I get protected? Do I own? Do I not? Yeah. And how do we get protected? So we are talking about, we have digitized platforms. So we are talking about, is there a digitalization policy within the institution? Think of your interactions with the students, with the business community. Do you have sufficient policies that govern how you interact? So also think, there is a national data protection policy. Is there one within your institution? If there exists a safeguarding policy at national level, is there one at the institutional level? Do you know of one institution that has one? If we have the master plan, the ICT, what it is providing for us, the presidential scheme, digitization program, do you have something that governs how your students engage in this? So, and do the two frameworks we have here, the linkages and the Directorate of Open Distance Learning, actually cover all these things you're talking about? So Prof is saying that there exists policy on face-to-face engagement. But then during the pandemic, those face-to-face were transformed into the digital space. As they went into the digital space, what governed that transition? Was it institutional wide or departmental level or school level?
Can I mention?
Yes.
Yes, so I think even the policies that exist on face-to-face engagement have been overtaken to some extent because we didn't revise them on time. Sometimes I think digitalization has overtaken a lot of events. I want to speak about the platforms on open distance and e-learning. And so we find a lot of open resources which actually give you an option of how to share your information. And we've seen that there are many open spaces now where we've, as in the past, you could share your information and that would be really guided by your copyright rights. But now, because you can earn from it, somebody asked about Zoom and all these other platforms, when somebody actually tapes or actually keeps your data, like now I think we are being recorded. So where does that data go? It's by me signing in that I can participate here. I've already given my consent that my data can move with this recording. So you find that with things like YouTube and all these other platforms that have come up, you're given an option when you put your data there, and it's a very simple thing that if you just click on the button, you've actually given your consent. So where are the policies that used to guide copyrights, and how can we revise them or engage with them at this time? That's just my thinking.
So I think even as we respond to this, what is coming up is also the other existing policy that govern how we interacted. We may not have had some institutional policies, but we saw like even Google, Zoom, and all the other platforms were asking you to accept their terms of engagement. So we are saying there are open resources and platforms guidance. Those ones existed that govern how we interacted. So within the institutions, have we exhausted, or are we not aware? Or maybe we do not have these policies existing. And what would be these policies? So, but we can do recommendations as we go along as well. So are we exhausted? Are we aware really of what we have in our institutions that govern how we relate with each other?
I think also to add on to...
There are none from... Yes.
Pardon? Yes, to add on to what has changed, yes, to add on to what has changed, I think we may be aware, but there's still a lot of confusion as of now. As for one, we had to revise because the Commission for University Education required us to do a self-assessment of how we are offering education online. And so we had to do a quick revision even on the Odell policy that we had. And now we had to elevate blended learning, which now accommodates both face-to-face and online learning together. And we had to actually define what it may, what is the policy guiding blended learning. So the lecturers are aware, but I think everybody's internalizing it in their own way, with a lot of confusion, I might add, yes.
Okay. All right, so at least you had an opportunity to review now the Odell to fit the new circumstances, right?
Yes, yes.
Okay.
Yeah, Chair.
Yes.
Just to bring in another dimension to this issue, you know, the issue of partnerships also has brought in another element. I don't know whether this is a policy issue or what, but there is this fear for the unknown, in the sense that if a private entity was to come in the mix and is able to offer what we in the university have been offering, but maybe now offer at a lower cost, would then the staff be, kind of, sacked or, relieved of their duties? So again, there's that other challenge. And just to share, I remember attending a conference one time, on a virtual conference, of a South African professor who was very mad about online platforms and what they can do. And this one was a conspiracist kind of thinking, where they said, who knows, all that you are presenting on these platforms that you don't know where they are storing your information, one day they will take over everything that you are doing and you'll be rendered irrelevant. And that really sent shivers in all of us. And you've already seen the issue of artificial intelligence and what it's now doing. So again, I don't know where colleagues can place this kind of thinking in this digitalized world, and particularly for those of us who are in service industry, and we are training manpower.
Okay, I think, Prof, that can be responded in the question that I'm highlighting right now on question 4. I think the fear is that if we don't know what the kind of protection on the offerings that we have, so like the knowledge sharing bit, patent recognition, IP, copyrights, and all that, yeah? And there are existing policies around that so that there is no fear on how we engage. We know to what level. So we ask ourselves that particular question at that particular level, yeah? Maybe I can put this there. So if, say, for example, now the universities or the private sector do not have exhaustive policies, but during that particular pandemic times, there were some other policies that we had that governed, like use of open resources, yeah? That's what we have had. And we have the various platforms giving their guidance in terms of engagement. That's what we have had, at least from Dr. Rangara. You had to sign to that. I think last year we signed a lot of that when you're going to use Zoom. When you're using Google, I think that's what Dr. Rangara was talking about. When you're using any other platform. So were there any others that existed that governed how we operated? I know that like KNET offered a platform. Was there a guidance on that? And were we aware of this? Anyone who is aware of this?
Yes, I won't speak for KNET, but I know KNET has been in existence since the early 2000s, like 2003. And they've been trying to get partnerships with the institutions of higher learning, and they are anchored, actually they are under the Ministry of Education. So they are recognized by the Ministry of Education, or they are supported, I'm not sure. But what I do know is that they work under the policies or from the Ministry of Education.
Okay, they're not related to ICT Authority in any way? Okay. Any other that we know that governed how we, at least it provided an opportunity for us to transition into the virtual space during the pandemic and even post-pandemic?
Same to the platforms themselves. Moodle is an open education resource because you don't pay for the license, while others you may have to pay for the license. So many universities in Kenya, we have used Moodle, and I think they always give us the option, which lecturers are not aware of, how to share your information or learning materials. So I don't know if we can use theirs as a policy as well.
Yeah, I think most people have signed to Moodle. That's what you're saying. At least most universities used Moodle. Yeah. Okay. Someone talks about MOUs. What do you think about MOUs? I think most of the universities have the memorandum of understanding. Okay. So if we don't know of any others, and if you know of any, please share in the chat. Whatever you think about, just share in the chat. So the kind of policies that existed, provided by other organizations that provided services or products to the university during the pandemic. Yeah, we saw that previously there was a lot of resistance going into the virtual space, but during the pandemic, we all embraced Zoom. Others embraced other platforms, and we had to sign to this. We see that KNET also provided a kind of a Zoom, and that during that particular period, they are anchored through the MOE and the ICT Authority. Then a very good question that Prof has raised, and this comes in our question 4. What is the policy framework for knowledge sharing and patent recognition in partnership between universities and the private sector? And here I think that, there are innovations that come out of this engagement? New knowledge is generated as you engage with the private sector. How do you have a policy framework that governs how the sharing, the funding, and the fear that whatever you produce is not stolen by anyone else or used by someone else as you engage? Do you have a framework that exists? Do you have the IP, intellectual property, kind of clauses that protect you when you have new products as you engage? Are you considering copyright? We also have organization. When you're publishing, do you publish together? Who owns the byproducts of these partnerships would be my question. Is there a policy framework around that, about the ownership?
I saw John hand was up. I don't know if you
John, you need to be speaking out because I can't see your hand. John?
Thanks for the opportunity. Regarding, sorry to take you back on number 3. Okay. Regarding policies on engagement or collaboration between private sector and universities on digitalization, and this is already mentioned, I think yesterday, where we have telecommunications providers like Safaricom, Airtel, Telecom, coming in to provide subsidized bundles to learners through universities. And this, I think, falls under CSR, corporate social responsibility. I'm not sure whether that can play a part, because we say that the access is predicated on, say, internet when we digitalize learning. Now, we gather that a lot of students are struggling with bandwidth and internet bundles access. Now, how do we place that? Does it have a place in terms of the collaboration between private sector and universities when they give bundles to learners and perhaps even lecturers? And then the other example that I would cite, Microsoft have their platform that is called Microsoft Teams. And I'm not sure if they did at the university level, but I'm aware at secondary and primary school level, they allowed tutors and teachers to have accounts, students also the learners to have accounts. And one distinct advantage with Microsoft Teams is that it's able to work very well, video and audio, even on very thin bandwidth. So I don't know whether CSR has a place there. It's not a policy, but I think within organizations, they have some sort of framework where they say, if there is a problem identified, a felt need, they intervene in the manner in which they did this time around. And then we can also flip that. Is there an opportunity? I think there is an opportunity if the government can entice these telecom providers to offer such kind as part of CSR, and in return, get some taxation waivers or rebates, because it's about enhancing access and the spiraling and cascading effect. That is the point I wanted to add.
Okay, thank you, John. So we're saying this doesn't exist. It's something we would recommend.
Exactly.
Yeah? It's not existing at the moment, but it would be as we explore how we partner with the private sector. How? Okay. But Microsoft Teams does exist. So this is not a recommendation. It's actually something that is existing. So as you think about this, you can put it in the chat so that we record it. I'm sure thoughts will be coming in as we go on, so that we don't keep going back. We can put it in the chat. But now we are asking ourselves, so we are partnering. And in this partnership, new knowledge is being generated, new products are being produced. But do we have a policy framework that who defines how it is owned and how the funding, I mean, the sharing of revenues generated from this innovation? And I think Prof said that there's a fear of unknown. If we engage the private sector to offer what we offer, then they offer it at a lower cost, then we lose out. Let's think about this just for a second, and then let's respond. Do we have existing frameworks within our institution, how we protect the knowledge we generate and the products that we are developing, our innovations? So we saw that at national level, something could be existing over here with the Kenya Innovation Agency. So if you have been able to read this particular document at the university, probably it can inform you on how you do that. But do we have an existing framework?
Yeah, as you conclude that, just to remind you that your team is due for health break now.
Okay.
16:00, so maybe you can get their responses on that and then give them their deserved break. Thank you. Sorry for intruding.
All right. So we have 5 minutes, right? So let's use the 5 minutes constructively.
Okay, Tommy, I'll speak a bit to private sector. So in terms of copyrights and such, most organizations, actually this seems to cut across, they tie innovation to an organization. So if I join Safaricom today, part of my employment contract defines that if I come up with something, it is construed to be, to be owned by the organization. That seems to be how it operates, unless I go and do it outside the confines of my organization. And that is to mean I have to find a way of implementing it, how it's funded and everything. Yeah. So how this probably can sit with where there is a convergence between private and public institutions, and then how maybe this can be taken care of. It's don't know, maybe there could be a defined framework in terms of, okay, in the outside world, what we're really looking at is, for the benefit of a fear of losing out is a revenue share model. So what you do, if you can define a policy of revenue share model, so I know if I come up with the idea and it's fully implemented, I'll always earn 5% of it throughout my life, or as long as such a thing exists. So we can probably define a policy or a rule around that, so that it also help lecturers or people who are having content to be aware in terms of what is in for me. Because at the end of the day, as long as you're giving content to students, you expect it to leak out. You might not really be able to hold on to it throughout your life, maybe. But then if we define how, where to share it and how it can be monetized, I think that would be the best word. Then now you're sure of your cut in the entire ecosystem, my thinking.
Thank you. So if we have anyone else that can be able to contribute to this, I think we can also think as we come back, we have MOUs that normally govern how you relate with a specific organization. So you have an understanding with a specific organization and how you will share out anything that you develop together. And yeah, so just think of that as we go out on our health break. I think I'll hand over to Jackie.
Yeah, thank you very much, Mary, and for the very fruitful discussions. We appreciate the discussions and the contributions of everyone. We were meant to have our health break for 10 minutes, starting 16 to 16:10. We only have 2 minutes. I don't know what members feel. Perhaps we can take 7 minutes. We reconvene at 4:15, so that we continue with the discussions. That will be 5 minutes into the next session. You may not log off, you can just stretch, but stay connected so that then you don't have to reconnect back again. At 4:15, we continue with the policy recommendations. Thank you.
Okay, fine. Thank you.
I hope we are all back. How many of us are back? Maybe we can unmute and say yes, so that we know that we are all here.
I'm here, Jacqueline.
Yes, Blair, at least
Me too.
the chair is back.
Yeah.
Kefa is back. I think we have quite a number of us back. Maybe Chair, you can pick on from here and take us through the policy recommendations.
Oh, sorry, I was muted. We have seen that there exists some kind of framework at national level, and we have some kind of framework that exists. I think from the chart, I saw people talking about MOUs that govern the sharing bit, that you have the MOUs that are existing. So I think that can be added to how you do this. Now let's ask ourselves first, as we go to recommendations, what have been some of the challenges we have experienced as we have implemented the policies? We look at both the policies at institutional level and the national level. Have we experienced any barriers or challenges as we engage with the private sector? So do I take silence that there have been no barriers and there have been no challenges whatsoever?
No, Chair, I like how you actually make people to say something. Yeah, I wouldn't really say that we have not experienced. We said something like, you know, when the environment is hazy, you know, it's not clear. That is a barrier in itself. That becomes a barrier. And then I don't know whether I'll be right also to say, of course, the issues of finances, limited finances to allow people to explore.
Okay. So we are seeing two key areas. The environment of engagement is not clear. So people don't know how to engage. And we're looking at funding. If funding is not available or the finances are limited, then people don't explore the partnerships. Any other barrier?
There's also suspicion.
Suspicion? What do you mean by that? And I hope yes?
Due to previous bad experiences, because there are some partnerships which resulted in, I mean, they didn't end well. Negative experiences, yes.
Okay.
All right. So that is a challenge for future partnerships, yeah.
All right. Any other barrier that what has been limiting us or making us not engage?
Mary, there are two hands up, John and Janet.
Yes.
Okay, John and Janet. We have John first, then Janet.
Maybe I'll allow the lady to go first, Janet. I'll speak.
Thank you, John.
Thank you.
Okay.
Really?
Okay. Thank you, John, for allowing me to come first. So I wanted to say support. That is, there's need for support from the all stakeholders in terms of training, in terms of resources, and all that, so that we are able to cope up with the implementation of policies. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Janet. John now.
Yes, thank you. So, Madam Chair, I had to give way because that's my alma mater. And
okay.
Dr. Joey taught me, was my teacher. So I needed to give that due respect to our lecturer still. Now, my substantive contribution in this is when it comes to challenges, you see the way in the public space, we are talking about lack of coordination and sometimes competition or lack of alignment between ourselves in the public space. There is that problem in the private sector as well. And for private sector, there is intense competition because they take these partnerships as leverage for brand visibility, for marketing, and sometimes undisclosed motives. So there is lack of coordination between the private sector players themselves, because you will find we have Kenya Web Conference portal, where myself now I'm working when I have to meet my advisors at the technical university, that's where we meet. You find instead of private sector coming to build something that is existing, they want you to use theirs. Then we end up with multiplicity of platforms that are not talking and greeting and meeting with each other. So competition among private sector players to position themselves for brand visibility, for marketing is I think something that we can cite here as a challenge, because you see, like I know the Microsoft people, and their intention, private sector is for profit. So while you are genuinely interested in offering the service to the learners, private sector mentality and approach sometimes is a little different, and that becomes a challenge. My second point in this is to do with, any other domain is as complex as the other. Partnership is a very partnership and fundraising is a technical domain, and there are tools, there are templates. For instance, you need to have a due diligence template or form before you engage into a partnership. Now, you would find most often in our public spaces, public universities, I would be appointed to be in charge of external linkage and partnership. I have no training. I only have my training in my area of specialization, but that does not guarantee I know how to do partnerships. So I think lack of tools, guidelines, templates, and actual manpower training in managing partnerships could also be a challenge when we are trying to build these partnerships, because you know what it means. You can be appointed and then I have never done it, but then it's my job. And nobody can come and say, no, you are not doing your job well. So you would find the private sector who are driven by other motives, either end up taking advantage to position themselves or something. So lack of tools, guidelines, templates, and manpower training in managing partnerships could be a challenge. Thank you.
Thank you, John. Okay, so those are some of the challenges. Is there any challenge that has not been touched on and you feel it has barred how you relate with the private sector or how the private sector relates with the universities? And these are part of, yes.
Yes, I wanted to make my contribution on the part of limitation on the private public sector partnership. Maybe to talk of my experience in trying to engage the private sector. In most cases, they want it to be a win-win. That is, the public sector and the private sector needs to to strike a balance between what is it in for either side. But in most cases, when we present our requests so that we are able to engage with the private sector, it comes out strongly that it is a public sector that really wants to benefit from the private sector. And even if we have a template to detail out what we have for the private sector, at times it doesn't come out like it is convincing that what we have can really benefit the private sector. That's number one. Number two, usually our engagement tends to be temporary. Like we have engaged the private sector, but probably just to enable them come in certain moments or times, like probably when you have a conference, but we don't have a plan for continuity. So you realize that it's on paper that there is an MOU with the private sector, but now to make a follow-up so that there is that continuity becomes a problem. So that is usually the limitation. Thank you.
Okay. So we are hearing from you that the public, when you talk of public, are you talking of the university?
Yes, I'm talking to the university about the university. For example, I work in a committee whereby I'm involved in industry linkages, university industry linkages. So that normally happens. You find that we don't have a plan for continuity. It is there, but now to follow up so that it is something that can be relied on, whether you have an event or not, but it is something that is like a standing order, becomes a challenge.
Okay, so temporary engagements that have a lifetime, and when they end, there is nothing to continue on. Sure. Okay, all right. So are there main areas that we feel that have been specific to engagement? I think earlier we had the health sector had specific engagement. Are there specific areas that have come up that we have strong engagement with the private sector? Again, probably silence means there are no specific areas of engagement. And I could ask, during the pandemic, how did these partnerships really manifest themselves? Think of in supporting your transition into the digital space. So as a university, you had to continue offering your products into the market, and probably the private sector offered something, like we're seeing Microsoft offered Teams. Yeah, and we had Zoom offered into that particular space. So how did the partnerships that you had that maybe that existed, how did they manifest themselves during the pandemic season? And how can you utilize that even post the pandemic? This question is both to the public, to the private sector and the universities as well.
You have some hands up.
Okay, which hand do I have up?
Janet and Tabitha.
Okay, Janet. And then Tabitha. Dr. Shemeli, is your hand up?
No, Mary, I don't know. It is not up.
Okay.
Sorry.
All right, whose hand is up? Oh, we have
Mine is up.
Yes.
Yes, I'm trying to have good manners now.
Okay.
Okay. Yeah, so at the number 6, I think you've moved up a bit, but can be both number 6 and 7. I think I would answer that. I've had many, at least 4 approaches for partnership, and mainly that is for online programs expansion, and also for supply of market-driven programs. One in, maybe I should not name them, but I find that they're in the form of business models because there must be something in it for them. And that also brings a challenge because the university shies away when it comes to issues of financing. There's been a little about infrastructure, just to bring interactive boards and e-readiness, e-classes which are ready for e-learning, especially now that we are doing blended learning. But of course, there's still a business model attached to it.
Okay.
So I think that answers both of them. Thank you.
Okay. Any other areas of engagement that have come up and this manifested themselves during the pandemic season? All right, so this will take me to the next question. So you had these opportunities on the areas that you could collaborate in offering your programs. We had the other policies that came from these offers, the people who are offering products, yeah? So let's think as our recommendation or what we want to see happen, what can we suggest that can be enhanced so that we have policies that support these particular partnerships? What can we do? We know now, first of all, we know that policies do exist and frameworks do exist. We see that we had opportunities to collaborate and in what areas that we collaborated. What can we do to enhance these policies?
Janet, hand is up.
Janet? Dr. Chemeli?
Okay, Tabitha's hand is up.
Okay. Yes, Tabitha, Dr. Rangara, yes.
Yes, I seem to be hogging the space, but
Okay.
I've had a little experience on this. So I think one thing, just riding on what Professor said about suspicion of lecturers thinking that my materials are going to run all over and I will not benefit out of it. I think we have reached an era of information sharing. And so we need to educate our lecturers. And also, as a country, we need to move with speed on either policy formation or reviewing our policies as regards to what the rest of the world is doing. So when I look at platforms like Sera and Aga Khan Academy, I see that other universities have brought their content into those platforms and people are paying for them. So we don't need to fear. We only need to get to make policies on how we can use our learning materials or how we can copyright whatever we produce and share it in a safe environment. So I think that's my take.
Erastus' hand is up.
Erastus?
Hello, hello, Madam Chair, Erastus here. I just wanted to touch on the need on how university collaborations can drive private sector innovation. And essentially, because you find in business, they're focused on how do we get this product or service out. So they're thinking of marketing, they're thinking of sales, they're thinking of profit. While in the university setting, the professors who are trained to do the research, working with their students, have all the time to do that. But when you combine the two of them, we're looking at the issue of time, cost, and quality. So the marriage between the two produces the best. And I'm particularly thinking about last year, I had an opportunity of visiting Boston, Massachusetts. And a friend of mine who has lived there for some time told me In the last maybe 10, 15 years, there have been many, many big companies which have moved their research centers to about 50 something colleges, college campuses which are there. Why have they done that? They have done that because they have realized that in these universities, there is wealth of information, there is wealth of talent and innovation coming from the educational institutions, the professors, the students. So instead of the companies spending time trying to come up with this research, the innovations, etc., they pour their money, the resources into these institutions so that those can drive the innovations that the companies need so that they can continue providing services or products to the consumers. So as we look in our area, in our particular case, if we are going to have strong national institutional policies for public-private engagement, then we have to reach a point where our private sectors are looking at educational institutions, higher education institutions, as equal partners who are going to be contributing to the greater good of what the private sectors are providing. And then also another good example is recently my organization has been engaged in working with TVET institutions in Kilifi County. And as we started asking questions about which companies are operating in Kilifi and what are they doing in particular to contribute to those institutions, we're finding that many of them are not doing anything. But our hope is, as we engage with those companies that have been given to us, we'll be able to create a marriage between those institutions and these companies so that they get to see the partnership, how those partnerships actually can enhance each other's missions at the end of the day. Thank you.
Thank you, Erastus. Whatever I've not captured, I think has been recorded and can be added by the Secretariat to this, because I think you have said a lot on that. So we are looking at policies that we need to develop policies for equal partnerships between universities and private sectors, so that we are also looking at policies that govern, that allow the private sector to get into the learning space so that innovation can be done at the learning space. So we need to develop such policies at institutional level and probably at the national level as well. Any other contribution to this?
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah, this is Simwa. I was going to say, and I like what our colleague Erastus has raised there. I even want us to be ambitious to even move beyond public universities and private enterprises forging links, because even government ministries, it's high time they got an opportunity to link more closely with universities. I'm now not mentioning private or public universities, just saying linkages with universities, because by the way, some of the things that will be done in the ministries are things that would have been done at the university. So that money that the universities don't have now would really come in through the partnerships that would be existing. But I'm also thinking of how we could find a way of, I don't know whether it is an institutional organ that can kind of help universities bring all those related policy items together so that a clear direction is obtained. And I'm just thinking about, look at, we have ICT, then there's ICT Authority, we have Ministry of Education, then you'll have NACOSTI, you'll have National Research Fund, we have Vision 2030, and it's saying certain things. But my thinking would be that these are too many things, so much so that the universities, if we don't have an institutional organ that brings all that together to help them then have a way of looking at what they can do. If we don't have that institution, then the universities, that confusion, that mix-up, that environment of unclarity or unclearness, I mean, comes into play. So we need a forum or an institutional organ to kind of bring all these things together. I hope I've made my point. Thank you.
Yeah, I think probably there's a term that is used like to bring this. I can't remember it. Maybe somebody knows it. You know, like, yeah, we do need the space. You're talking about the space where all these are brought together so that we see what are existing policies, yeah? Because there's, you're saying there is an unclear, I think earlier we said that there was an unclear environment of engagement. So people fear, they don't know how to go about this, but they do exist. So I don't know, I think the Secretariat can find the term, because I know there's a term that describes, it's not a warehouse or something like that, but there is a database that we can actually have, but who houses this, yeah?
Yes.
Chair, sorry to interject. We are 12 minutes into the next session. We need to have an introduction of the speaker. I don't know how you're going to go about summarizing this so that then we allow Steve to introduce people.
Okay, so I was thinking maybe the question 12 to 15. I think the question 10 and 11 was touched during the access to equitable higher education, and the rest will be maybe dealt with during the forum tomorrow. But I was wondering from question 12 to 15, maybe we can have one response, because it's looking at maybe the recommendations about how the engagements that we have had. I think that has been responded to. How we can engage the internal stakeholders in the development of the policies. How do we engage them, and involve the private sector in the development of these policies? And thinking again, who would be the stakeholders? I think this has been mentioned earlier, like what Professor Sima was talking about. We have all these players, we have these agencies in the government, they are part of that. So maybe we can name some of that, we can put that in the chat. Prof, you have named quite a lot of them. We have NACOSTI, we have something from maybe KIRDI. All these sectors have something that govern how we are engaging in the private sector and the copyright issues. So do we have recommendations around that? And do we have, we say that one of the recommendations on the forum, we need something that puts together the policies, a forum that puts policies together. So what other recommendation do we have around who are going to be the stakeholders and the players in this particular space?
Number 16, just on that number 16, the issue of what forums exist for universities and private partners too. And I'm just thinking about, I don't have the details and I think we can check. In the recent past, we have had a forum that involved Kenya National Qualifications Authority, NACOSTI was involved, TVET was involved. So I would say, yes, those forums exist, but then how much of that information gets to all the players would be the issue of concern.
So we have the forum. So the recommendation is getting away of making sure that everybody is informed and what forums actually do exist.
Yeah, at the regional level, sorry for coming in. At the regional level, the Inter-University Council organizes the public-private sector forums every 2 years, but this doesn't happen at the national level. So maybe if we can cascade what IUC does at the regional level so that it has a place in the national level, then it can actually interface this relationship between the public and the private sector.
Yeah, and Chair, for lack of a better word, I think there's a way in which we need to create a synergy between all the players. There's a need to have, what one would call an everlasting synergy or linkages between, not only when there are issues that is the time people congregate and come together. Then after the issue has been solved, like the way I know most of these institutions are wishing very fast that the pandemic disappears, so that, the idea of bring back the old good days, so that we are not even again thinking of the future. Instead, we are saying bring back the good old days. That's where we want to remain. I don't know. Yeah. Thank you.
What would you suggest on successful implementation of these strategies, of the policies, yeah, for us to be able to move to the next level? So we are saying we need to create the forums. We need to create the forums and probably adapt or cascade what is happening at international level to the regional level. I mean, to the national level. That's what we have had. Is there anything else we need to add to that? Because I'm feeling like this is a recommendation to the rest of what we have as the questions that we have below. And yes, someone talking?
Madam Chair?
Yes, Brian?
Probably we could just add, okay, from the private sector side, we have a lot of interactions through the Kenya Private Sector Alliance. So probably the public universities could link up with the Kenya Private Sector Alliance and maybe have a forum whereby they could specifically engage the private sector on some of the modalities they have on engagement, and also some of the needs or the opportunities that they have, which they would like to engage the private sector. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you. All right. I think because of our time limitation, please again share in the chat. I can paste whatever you share in the chat over here so that I can hand over, because the stakeholder can be best explained through our people model. So I will hand over back to Jackie. Please do enter anything you think in the chat box so that we can be able to record that. Jackie, I will hand over back to you.
Thank you, Mary, for the wonderful job. And this brings us now to the next session, which is our PIPA session. We have only 10 minutes to the top of the hour. I know Steve is able to manage within the time frame, maybe some 10 minutes or so. Steve, if you're able to give an introduction of the PIPA. Please take it.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair, and thank you, Dr. Nyerere. Confirm you can hear me?
Yes, yes, we can hear you.
Yeah, so as Chair rightly said, ultimately, we need to develop a cogent theory of change that we can use to take forward the kind of policy options that we have framed. PIPA, or participatory impact pathway analysis, helps us to do that through two major indices. The first index is that PIPA helps us to do a causality analysis in terms of the root cause of the problem. And secondly, it helps us to frame out the theory of change. And that it does through an actor-oriented strategy. And the actor in question here is the policymaker. The policymaker. So essentially, therefore, we don't just put a list of policymakers, but we do a bit of something that we do in the market survey. We do an analysis of who the policymaker is, what they know about the issue, what they care about, what they need to know, and what we need to do. So
And that's the essence of people. Ordinarily, it would have been useful for us to go through each of the questions. But it seems to me that it is possible for us to do this in a collective session. So what I suggest is that in the remaining 9 minutes, if we can do a list of who are the critical primary duty bearers, and we use the word duty bearer as a human rights sort of positioning. And we do deploy this human rights positioning because the question here is a question of higher education, and education is part of Article 43, which is framed as a human rights issue. So if we can go through the list and just pick out who are the stakeholders whom you're talking about, for example, the Ministry of ICT, and we go on and on, who are the other stakeholders? And then in the bigger collectivized plenary, we can then do a detailed paper. And we did defer paper also for yesterday's session because we thought both due to time and also because of the entanglement of the themes, it would be great if we did it all together. So I want to invite Madam Chair to help us, Jacqueline, to help us in pulling out the stakeholders. We list it out. Annie had done an initial version, and these two can be mingled together. And then based on that, we can decide on how to proceed in the next meeting. So back to you, Jackie.
Sorry, I missed it. What did you require me to do, Steve?
I would like us to go through and just see the list of stakeholders who emerge from the mapping that we've done this afternoon. For example, the Ministry of ICT is one of them. The other one, I would say, is the Ministry of Finance. The other one, I would say, is the Budget Committee of Parliament. So we can go on and just list the various stakeholders, primary duty bearers, whom we've picked out from today's session. Thank you.
Should I go back up and we look at all of them, or we can remember them offhand and then I can just type them for you?
Yeah, if members can just the one they remember, you just write. You don't have to go up.
Yeah. I think it's called ICT Authority.
Or Ministry of Communication. I don't know if we need to go to the ministry itself or the authority.
Having both of them would be ideal, because remember that on one side, we are keen on the policy infrastructure, and on the other side, we are interested in practice. So I would say put both of them, so put also the authority. Thank you.
I think the presidential, the PTT is also housed here. I'm not very sure.
We can confirm that later. You can just list it. We confirm later.
Thank you, Ma. We have Microsoft.
Should we list ministries like Ministry of Education, Ministry of Health? Maybe Ministry of Education stands out, but for the other ministries, maybe Ministry of Finance, Ministry of Health, we could say ministries. I don't know if we need to list.
To be specific, yeah. I think Ministry of Education and Communication stand out, yeah, a lot.
So
yeah,
at
they
a
stand out.
or something.
And I think there was one on innovation, yeah, under Ministry of Education. The link we were given.
Is that Nakosti or?
No, this one here. The Kenya Innovation Agency.
Innovation Agency.
Yeah.
What about the universities themselves?
Yeah, they are. And I'm wondering, even the organizations that are represented over here, aren't they part of the stakeholders?
Sure. I don't know how many we need to record because there are quite a number.
Yeah, I'm seeing someone in the chat has written NRF.
Yes.
Okay.
On the chat, there is Kirdi as well.
This Kirdi. Okay. All right.
So you know, I think when we talk of the Ministry of Education, do we also bring in, among others, Commission for University Education? No, and such like things, because I'm raising this thing because there's that question of why do they care? Who are these people? You know, what do they need to know? Because those are now the people who then guide the development of the policy issues.
I think we've written the Commission for University Education there under the Ministry of Education.
Good. Oh,
yeah.
Okay, good.
So someone has read, what is ODPC? And then we have KEPSA. Evans, what does ODPC stand for? I may be blind on that.
Hello, at some point we discussed matters of IP and rights. So I thought maybe the Office of the Data Protection Commissioner could have highlights on that. So.
Okay. I think you can send us the full name, data protection. Okay. So from the ministry, yes.
Kenneth featured.
Yeah, Kenneth featured a lot.
Telcoms, without naming a particular one. I heard telecoms featuring quite often.
Oh, yes. Are we exhaustive of the stakeholders that have emerged during our discussions? You know, there is, I don't know what it's called, OER, that was mentioned earlier that provided space for the open and distance learning. I think it's called, okay, I don't know what the full name stands for, the OER.
Open Educational Resources.
Yes. I don't know.
It is Open Educational Resources.
Stakeholders, these are not really stakeholders, but they are resources that can be posted by different organizations. I don't know if we need to, unless now we go to the specific organizations that host
that offer that.
Yeah. Maybe like Commonwealth of Learning, that can be one of them if we want to.
So do we put that here?
Yeah, they have they host a number of open resources, so we can have it here instead of having the resources themselves.
Okay.
Commonwealth of Learning.
Okay.
I'm wondering whether this would be, I don't know. I'm thinking about Annie, Pasga. They care. These are agents, organizations that care. I know we are there. I don't know. I'm just thinking.
Yeah, that's what I was asking. The people who are here and care. Yeah. Yeah, that's what I was asking. Pascal, Annie.
We heard a lot about ICT, the ICT companies. There was there Microsoft? I think I had Microsoft.
Yes, I've written Microsoft.
Yeah. Maybe in addition also to Commonwealth of Learning, we can include AVU if we are talking about the online resources. We can have the AVU, the African Council for Distance Education.
Is IAN interested in the higher education or just the lower education?
I know, presented here.
The ICT companies, we only have Microsoft.
HP. This will be part of it.
Okay. Google. Is IBM a partner? I think they have a universities linkages kind of a program. I don't know how many universities have engaged with them.
We are even housing them.
Oh yeah, at Quare, yeah?
Yes.
Yes. Okay, so Prof, I take it back to you.
Thank you. I think from here now, we will, in the next session, try and do a detailed analysis based on the question that we've raised here. I really thank all of you from my side. This was very animated conversation. And Chair, you are really good in, extracting the best from people. So I take it back to Nyerere to lead us in wrapping it up. Thank you very much. Over to you, Nyerere.
Thank you, Steve and Chair for that. That brings us to the very final session where we wish to get closing remarks from James and Pauline before we close? I know we are 6 minutes past the time allocated for this, but please bear with us for a few more minutes to just close the session. James?
Yeah, thanks so much, Jacqueline. I think this has been a very good session. We have really covered a lot, and this is actually what we had expected. And I didn't know that we would get as many people as we have got for the private sector session. This has been really good. So I want to thank all of you, thank the chair, thank all those who contributed. We are going to incorporate all this and also into part of the synthesis document that we are doing. But it really now puts us to get through into the policy context that we wanted to get into. And now we have pulled out quite good materials that can take us to the next stage where we are going to discuss with the policymakers. We'll condense this further when we have the plenary that will bring the three groups together, and then we take the next steps from there. So without taking further so much of the time, I want to very sincerely thank you all for taking your valuable time for the 3 hours to be with us in this meeting. Thanks so much to everyone. Thanks.
Thank you very much, James. Pauline?
I don't want to come in the way between the end and you're going away, because we've been here for a full 3 hours. And I know we are quite exhausted, but I think we end on a very, very good note. It's been a very rich afternoon. The discussions have been very, very rich. The participation has been quite engaging. And I want to echo Steve's comments. Mary, I think you've been a very good facilitator. You are able to get a lot of information from participants. But the success of this has largely been from all of us. We've been very, very engaged. We expressed a lot of interest in the subject at the discussion. So I want to join my colleagues in saying thank you very much for your active participation, for your open and honest discussion. And this actually is the essence of this space that we have provided, that we can freely and openly discuss issues. So I just want to thank you very much. As a way of winding up, I want to say that there's obviously a lot of synergy and overlap between the three groups, the three themes. Yesterday we did access, today we've done PPP, and tomorrow we go to the postgraduate group. And because of this synergy and overlap, we want to welcome you to tomorrow. I hope you can afford the time. We are going to have another very engaging 3 hours discussion. So welcome to tomorrow. The links have already been shared in the concept note that in the program that was shared earlier on. So we hope to see you tomorrow. But for now, I want to say good afternoon, good late afternoon, good evening. I don't know when evening starts, but I just want to wish you a very good after convening session. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much and have a good evening.
Thank you.
Good evening to everyone.
Good evening to everybody.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
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 Bye.